White breath lifts off the black water as if the fjord itself is exhaling. The sky is pale glass. Snow stitches the cliffs in thin white seams. A dorsal fin splits the surface like a blade, then another, and the water tightens around them as if fabric were being pulled. She floats there, a human speck in a dresssuit, mask freckled with ice, fingers hooked against the cold. A white patch drifts toward her. An orca's eye, dark as stone, regards her. She inhales slow. The animal turns away, easy as weather. If you want to see why she returns every winter, stay with me. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Her name is Mara Keating. She grew up far from the sea, where winter is dust and the only whales are decals on farm trucks. Her father fixed windmills by feel and taught her to listen for strain in a machine the way you listen for a lie in a voice. She learned to swim late. The first whale she saw was a museum skeleton with a price tag and a cartoon smile in the gift shop. The first orca she saw alive rode itself across gray water with one tall black stroke and a white flash, then absence, then the slow reset of the sea. She came north for graduate school and stayed because she could not stand to be far from the edge. She bought a used Zodiac with a rubber hull that squealed on ice and an engine that coughed when wind stacked waves into short, angry hills. She taped a page, "Put your body where your questions are." Each morning she backed down the ramp and slid into the dark. Steam fog, needle rain, decks skinned with crystals. She ran a cheap hydrophone into a small recorder and a camera that ate batteries. It was enough. The pods moved like a text she was still learning to read. Matriarchs holding pressure, juveniles testing distance, bulls writing punctuation with their fins. There were rules. No touching, no feeding, no crossing their path, no joining when they drove herring toward the harvest nets. The men on the pier preferred harvesters to fishermen. Mara held to the rules because she wanted to be welcome in this water and because she wanted to belong to no one. She turned down a television contract that would have paid for a bigger boat. She turned down an investor offering an AI co-pilot and a calendar of guaranteed virality. She preferred a pencil, a paper log, and a habit of saying no. By her fifth winter, the harbor knew her. The coffee girl poured 2 shots before she reached the window. Lowell stocked the odd filters her motor needed. Locals brought warnings. Ranger began to swim parallel, as if measuring. One day he rolled the flash white, and she understood he had been watching longer than she knew. His fin stood as tall as she was, a clean black mast. A pale scar curved around it, a parenthesis from an old propeller strike. He held his head lower than the others, jaw angled, not submissive, not aggressive, just awake. She added a second hydrophone she cast in resin on the shed floor because the commercial rig was too fragile when the fjord began to carry knives of ice. She waited for the pods to invite her by their circling and deliberate loitering. She never chased. She never boxed them in. She learned to dive with patience and discipline. It is easy to love orcas in a thumbnail. Harder to admit they are not here for you. She said that to her camera in 10 different kinds of weather. She said it with salt on her lips and bruises on her shins, and a grin she could not suppress when a matriarch chose to pass so close that the water lifted her like a hand. The winter the trouble began, the herring came weak and late. December gave wind. January gave glare ice and a skipping tide. A salmon farm upriver broke ground after petitions, meetings, roadblocks, and an elderly couple chaining themselves to a backhoe. Someone scrawled "Welcome to your dead fjord" on the marine forecast board. The council promised triple redundancy. No one believed redundancy beats weather. Her footage traveled. Conservation lawyers called. Tourism boards called. Content mills offered packages that smelled like sugar and cost like rot. She could have sold quick. She chose a long winter record instead, a ledger of before and after. She asked for truth with no trap. She spoke to harvesters, the clerk, a teacher, a bar cook. She kept the camera quiet and the questions clean. She did not promise fixes. She promised to look. The harbor in winter smells like diesel, iodine, wood smoke, and steel. She measured days by those scents and by cold. She could guess the light by how the air wrapped her fingers. February turned phones into quiet stones. She would not call herself solitary. She would not call herself lonely. She had Ranger. She had Myra, a matriarch whose rhythms she could recognize without looking. She had work, and work is a kind of company. On a Saturday wrapped in high glare, a calf washed up. The body lay on the tide line. The dorsal had collapsed, soft as wet cardboard. The town gathered without being called. Children were shuffled back. Someone spread a tarp. Mara stepped close enough to see the faint bruise at the calf's lower jaw and a thin black indentation forward of the eye. She took photos. A man said don't. She kept taking them. The cold made her hands clumsy. The cold made everyone loud and then quiet. A contract biologist arrived with a cooler and a script. She said necropsy. She said likely stillbirth. She said cause of death unknown. Mara nodded once and kept her mouth steady because you don't argue on the beach when a small body is still warm. Back at the pilot house, she spread the photos across the table. Rope mark, yes. Farm mooring, maybe. Crab pot line, possible. Lobster gear, rare here. There was a piece missing. Not proof. Pattern. Grief needs a scapegoat. The harvesters blamed the farm. The farm blamed the storm. The council blamed a perfect sequence of bad luck. Activists blamed everyone and argued over phrasing. The winter sun slid lower. No one slept well. Mara kept diving. The pods were quieter on the hydrophone, as if conserving breath. She recorded what she could. She watched the farm's nets thrash in a blow and wondered how redundancy holds when moorings fail in sequence. You could say the crime began with that calf. You could say it began in a warm room where a permit was signed. You could say it began when cold water became a ledger entry. The law would ask for a hand and a rope and a match between cut and cutter. The law would ask for chain of custody. Winter does not ask. Winter just keeps showing up. In early February, another body surfaced the town's deepest fear. Not a whale, a man, face down near the mouth of the inner harbor, wedged between two pilings. Red jacket with reflective strips. Pocket open. Boat tied 3 slips down, fenders rubbed shiny. Joel Pennington, 53, quiet at the bar and known for never killing his decklights. Mara had filmed with Joel the year before. He let her wire a camera on his stern to show how Orcas worked the wake when he powered down to avoid slicing across a pod's route. You don't kick up a bow wave in a field full of birds, he said, and he meant whales. She still had footage of him smoking. Winter light laying smoke flat along the water. In that light, he looked like someone who would not fall by accident. By morning, the harbor filled with bulky coats and clipboards. Reporters arrived. The farm issued a statement. It expressed condolences and declared no connection. People began to say accident. Mara did not use the word. She did not name it at all. She showed Joel's light. She showed the slick where the tide turns. She traced the route a body might take. She logged the tide, the wind, the time. She slept in fragments and woke with the taste of salt as if the sea had come to her mouth while she dreamed. She called Wren, a former cop from a different chapter of her life, a woman with a way of listening that turned testimony into confession. Wren told her what to look for and to be careful with her footage. Use time stamps. Keep backups in different places. Expect pushback. Expect lies wrapped in kindness. Mara took the Zodiac to the line where the farm's lights ended and the night began. She cut the engine and lay with her face over the side, listening. Orcas articulate darkness with clicks and pulses that become a language when you learn to listen. They map, they test, they ask. She heard Myra's measured cadence. She heard Ranger deeper, a baritone undercurrent. She heard a metallic clatter that did not belong to whales or tide, distant, brief, as if a gate had been moved and then stilled. An envelope appeared under her windshield wiper with only her first name on it. Inside, a magazine photo of a diver smiling next to a captive dolphin. Across it, in a rushed hand, fraud. Beneath it, leave IT alone. She kept the page in a plastic sleeve, the way you keep evidence you cannot yet name. On the pier, she met an oyster farmer. The woman said she had seen a small inflatable by the point the night Joel died. A flared lantern, a single shouted sound. She had not told the council. She did not need that kind of winter. Mara's days narrowed. Dive at dawn. Interviews at noon. Edit at night. Sleep in stitches. She kept the stove fed and the pipes alive. Lowell checked her engine without being asked. The coffee girl added an extra shot and a note, "Please be careful." Wren called at odd hours. Winter sometimes offers small mercies. A day of sun. A wind shift. A pod so near you feel the exhale wash your mask. Those mercies kept her steady. One morning fog twisted in threads on the water like smoke from a slow fuse. Ranger rolled beneath her and flashed the white of his underside, a gesture she had seen only when he needed to say something she could not yet translate. He rolled again. Along his left jaw ran a shallow crease that had not been there before, red scab under salt, a mark that looked too neat for rock and too cruel for accident. The council held a meeting in the school gym that smelled like pine cleaner and dust. The room split itself on schedule. Jobs versus whales. Progress versus memory. A teenager stood and said she wanted both whales and work. Mara filmed faces more than words. The farm's talking points sat on paper like orderly birds. They did not fly. Back on the water the next day, truth finally snagged. Orange twine caught on a barnacled rock at the high tide line. Not the local tan, not the standard blue. A loop cut clean at one end and frayed at the other. In the threads, a hair that was not animal, human, brown. She bagged it with tweezers and gloves. She had nowhere official to take it without losing control of the record she was building. She refrigerated it next to mustard and a jar of herring roe she was trying to learn to like. By late February, the farm's boundary sat empty after dark. That might have been fear. It might have been coordination. She set a trail camera high in the rocks along the point where she had seen light in Joel's last frame. She hid it well. 2 nights of crows. A third night with a zodiac running dark along the line. A figure stood in the bow, posture tall and efficient. The lantern they held was shielded like a secret. The camera caught no face. The next morning light ran up the fjord as if pulled by thread. 3 pods converged on the herring run. Mara launched fast, heart up in her throat the way it is when something big is about to declare itself. She cut the engine well short and slid into the water. Cold clasped her ribs. The world simplified. Above, pale sky. Below, a slow cyclone of herring, dense as weather. Around them, orcas and spirals, mirroring one another with the certainty of a practice drill. Ranger passed, black scythe through silver fish. He did not look at her. She did not expect him to. Mira made a deliberate arc that looked like teaching. The calf stayed tucked. The water to her right brightened with bubbles. A net. Someone had set a net across the cove. Not the harvesters. Wrong mesh. Wrong anchors. A quick job. A night job. The opening between 2 rocky teeth had been closed, and closing it meant the pods had no clean exit. She kicked toward the floats to mark the net and call it in. The line was not solid. There was a gate. The gate was zip-tied shut. The zip ties were tagged with orange twine. Her knife came free as if it had been waiting its whole life for this cut. One tie, two. The gate loosened like a mouth and let the water speak through. Orcas know openings the way they know pressure. They felt it and shifted. Mira moved first toward the gap in a smooth, no-hurry line that said trust, but move now. From the rocks, a figure watched. Hood up. Still, she could not read a face. She felt the intent, a cold beneath the cold. She cut another tie. The gate swung wider. Snow pecked at her mask. When she looked back, the figure was gone. The net slackened. The tide took over. She had a minute before the current turned the gate into a trap again. She put her shoulder against the line and shoved. Rope burned through fabric and bit her glove. The Orcas streamed out like quiet arrows. No thrash, only commitment. A calf rolled once in water, bright with relief. Ranger followed last, fin black against light. She counted bodies. She did not see the rock shelf until it rose under her knees. The current slapped her sideways. She grabbed for anything and found rope. The rope tightened. It pulled. From shore, someone answered the pull with steady patience. Put your body where your questions are. She had. The line kept pulling. The water kept breathing. Her knife was in her right hand. Her left hand was caught. The fjord gave her one flat second to decide what to cut. The rope cinched her wrist and dragged her toward the rocks. Cold flooded the glove, needles under skin, a pain that narrowed everything to blade and breath. She cut once, shallow. The line held. She cut again, hard, and the strands parted with a rough shiver. The pull vanished. She rolled onto her back, kicked clear of the gate, and drifted into open channel where the water breathed slower. Orcas slid past like moving dusk. Mira led. Ranger followed last, steady as a keel. The herring ball loosened and spread like torn silk as the cove exhaled. On the rocks, the watcher stepped backward into spruce. She marked the white quartz vein, the broken knee of lichen, the bent top of a tree like a crooked finger. She swam to the Zodiac, hauled over the transom, and saw the rope burn across her palm, red under salt. Her breath steadied. She radioed the coordinates, named the hazard, requested a patrol. She did not say crime. She said net across a traditional route, gate zip-tied shut, orange twine. The harbor master said they were on it. The farm said not their gear. Lines clear, hearts with whales. Language smooth as oil on ice. By the time she reached the ramp, snow sifted like flour. The patrol waited with clipboards and faces made of procedure. She surrendered a bag with the short orange thread she had cut from the line. The warden held it to the gray light. Not local, he said. He logged her trail camera card from the ridge. Chain of custody, the harbor master murmured, careful with each syllable like a man walking across clear ice. Home, the stove earned its keep. Steam rose off neoprene. Heat moved in slow, patient waves. She ran water and watched the white of the rope burn blush pink. New entry on her body's ledger. Left hand, fjord mouth, gate cut. Wren called back. She listened without interruption until the end, then said, "You made someone visible. Expect pressure. Expect kindness that turns sideways." Pressure arrived in a tidy envelope tucked under her wiper at the market. A photocopy of a diver grinning beside a captive dolphin, the word fraud scrawled across it, and under that, leave IT alone. The downstrokes were hard enough to tear. She slid the page into a sleeve, filed it beside the orange twine, and wrote the date on the plastic in block letters. Evidence is anything that tries to hide. She returned to the cove at first light. The floats were gone. The mesh was gone, but water remembers touch. A faint trail of silt ran across the mouth where the net had dragged on the turn. On the anchor rock, a fresh rectangle of scrape showed raw stone through old growth. She photographed it cleanly. Out past the mouth, Ranger surfaced and rolled enough to meet her eye. Not warning, attention. And he moved on. Mira held the pod outside the coves. Roots had shifted. Roots are maps of trust. The oyster farmer found her at the dock with a thermos and a look. Dark inflatable, 2 nights, she said. Lantern cupped, path by the hotel. Someone smart about wind and dumb about memory. Tall, the kind of stillness that reads hired. She nodded and wrote it down. The warden carried the orange thread to a lab up the coast. The harbor master pinned a paper map and started a line of thumbtacks. The gym meeting smelled like coffee and old varnish. Jaw's widow sat 3rd row, coat folded on her lap like a sleeping child. A council chair spoke of unity. The farm's regional manager smiled and said redundancy. 3 moorings where old-timers had won. Alarms that text phones that text other phones. He said they respected whales. He said they did not own orange twine. He said contractors had guidelines and souls. Faces in the bleachers did the math of hunger and habit. A teacher asked why the whales had shifted routes. A teenager asked who kept running dark. A harvester said people who love whales should love jobs too. The chair moved the agenda, along as if steering a stubborn skiff. Then the widow stood. She asked who was with Joel the night he died. The room altered. No one answered. The widow sat, spine straight. Silence carried weight. Wren caught Mara by the door. A name from a number. 0427 tattooed on a wrist to remember a date after a concussion. Lee Porter, 26, part-time at the farm moving gear. Cousin to the council chair by marriage. Ticketed near the point the week Joel died, after midnight. He told the officer he was watching seals. There had been ice, no seals. Wren's mouth was flat. "Be ready," she said. Mara found Lee on the breakwater, crouched over a crate of fittings. He said he liked the videos where she let whales be whales. He said the new ones made neighbors into villains. She said she made questions, not villains. He looked at her rope burn. He said questions cut. She asked about the point. He said people walk there to clear their heads. She asked about gates. He stared at the bucket until the silence grew a skin. She asked about Joel. He exhaled, a small sound of somebody deciding between 2 bad directions. Ben said Joel told him to stop running dark and said he would call the warden. He said Joel meant it. He said he respected Joel. He said he had to get back to work and stood as if pulled by a string tied to his name. That night, the trail camera caught 2 shapes under the crooked spruce. The quick one arrived first. The heavier one followed. They didn't speak at first. A small bag moved from one hand to the other. The light found a jawline and then let it go. She sent the clip to Wren. Pattern, Wren wrote. We need a voice. We need a money trail. We need a hand on a knot. Morning brought a hard north wind and a call from the warden. The orange thread matched a brand sold 2 towns over to farm contractors and salvage yards, not to fishermen. The smear by the creek had DNA. Joel. Old, but his. He might have tried to climb. He might have been pulled. Procedure wrapped every sentence like tape. He said a prosecutor 2 counties over was listening. He said a recorded conversation would move this from winter rumor to paper. Mara visited the salvage yard. Jay, with hands like marine rope, kept a notebook because memory lies when rent is due. He flipped to a page near Joel's last night. 2 spools of line and a crate of floats sold late to a man in a branded jacket who didn't haggle and didn't smile. She filmed the line, the date, Jay's face. He looked wrecked by his own neat pen. He said he'd tell the warden on camera if needed. He said he wanted whales for his grandkids and a town that didn't eat itself to stay warm. She met the farm manager at the dock because he wanted to clear the air. He smiled like a fundraiser. He spoke about winter economics, about keeping families through February, about redundancy as a form of love. She let him talk himself smooth. Then she asked, blunt as ice, if crews ran at night. Sometimes, he said, when weather leaves no choice. With lights, she asked. Of course, he said. We're not animals. She asked if anyone had been up on the point helping a fouled line last week. He looked at the fin that touched the marina and back at her. His smile thinned, then returned as if reheated. We all want to get through winter, he said. Some of us want more than that, she said. Be careful, he said. You too, she answered, and walked away before heat made her clumsy. Wren texted. Prosecutor wants audio of direction or payment. She set a second trail camera lower on the path and a tiny recorder at knee height where men paused to choose words. Dusk fell early and hard. In the feed, a quick one appeared, then the heavier one. The recorder caught a sentence that sat in her ear like a splinter. It is easier when the whale's down to come in. A number followed, price for labor or silence. The heavier voice said, leave it for ebb. The quick voice asked, what about the diver? She sent it all to Wren. Keep going, Wren wrote. Proof lives in the act. Friday was the day they used in town for hard things. They would set another gate on Friday. Proof lives in the act. She slept shallow, like a line paying out. At dawn the warden texted, ridge covered, Wren. Plain sedans in the lower lot. The harbor master sent a thumbs up she had never seen him use. She launched and held position far enough to pretend coincidence, close enough to cut if the moment came. The inflatable slid from behind the hotel's rock tomb and moved toward the mouth of the cove. Lantern cupped. The net paid out in a practiced 5-move sequence. Floats, mesh, anchor on the scar. Gate zipped with the same orange ties. She counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the hydrophone, Ranger made a single low pulse that rang along her spine. Myra approached the mouth, tested the mesh with a cool burst, and spoke to the pod. The calves tucked tighter. The juveniles held distance. The men watched the water as if it were a spreadsheet, and the numbers had turned red. She slid into the water. Cold bracketed her ribs. She cut the top tie. Plastic gave with a brittle snap. She cut the second and the third. Water began to speak through the opening. Orcas understand openings. Myra shifted first. Ranger slowed. The quick man swore. The heavier man hauled, trying to cinch the gate. She reached for the fourth tie and felt the old pain flash in her palm where the rope had written its earlier story. She cut clean. The gate loosened. The whales passed through, one by one, with intention and without drama, the way wise bodies leave traps behind. Plain coats stood on the ridge and on the rock, official voices carrying in the cold. The boatman froze between retreat and explanation. The warden slid down the rubble with his badge visible and calm on his face. He did not raise his voice. He asked for names. He asked for hands. The heavier man squared and began to negotiate with silence. The quick man stared at the water as if answers lived there. On the hotel path, Lee stood hatless, pale, eyes on the place where Mira had disappeared. Word spread across town in minutes. People poured in from stores and classrooms. The chair looked carved. The manager arrived with lawyers and the kind of confidence money buys early. Lee stood alone near the door, hands empty. Joel's widow sat in her usual place, chin up, grief like steel. The warden summarized the morning. Illegal obstruction. Evidence collected. Audio captured. Chain of custody preserved. He did not say names. The room supplied them in a low, steady tide. Jay raised his hand and said he had a notebook. He described the late-night sale. The manager's lawyer objected on principle and posture. The chair tried to steer the meeting back into safe water. Wren stood and asked Lee to speak. He said no, then yes. He said he had carried rope because someone told him it was money and no harm. He said he had been told to keep the lantern shielded. He said Joel told him to stop and said he would call the warden. He said he was sorry. He did not offer a name for who told him to go. His eyes slid to the manager and then away as if burned. The manager's voice came smooth. Contractors go rogue, he said. Policy forbids obstruction. Our hearts are with whales and widows. He smiled as if he meant it. Smoothness is armor. Armor squeals on ice. People heard the squeal. The chair called a recess. Outside, light cut the air into glass. Phones lit. The prosecutor called the warden. The warden nodded once and walked toward the station with the slow pace of someone counting steps to a next duty. Mara went to the pier and looked into the black-green. Far out, a fin lifted and fell. She felt the ache in her palm and the fine tremor in her fingers that always came after danger ended, but the body hadn't been told yet. She thought about gates and routes, about pressure and choice, about how a town decides whether to open or close. She thought about Joel's habit of keeping his deck lights on, even when ice made them look like stars near water. She thought about the calf on the sand and the thin bruise at the jawline that said rope and hurry. She rechecked her backups before the afternoon session, like padding a passport, drives labeled by date, copies mirrored to a cloud she did not trust, but used anyway, a second camera battery charging beside the kettle. She wrote the timeline on a single sheet in thick pencil so she could carry it in a coat and feel it, crinkle when nerves tried to walk her out of a room. Calf, gate, cut, Joel, creek, twine, salvage yard, bag, voices, Friday, open cove. She penciled a blank square after that, whatever the town chose next. People filed back into the gym with faces set like winter roads. The chair called order. An order came roughly, as if hauled by hand. The manager spoke first, longer this time, and wove phrases about community and stewardship, about partnerships and science, about how their boats never ran dark, except when safety demanded it. He said he welcomed outside review and internal audits, and a conversation about best practices. He said he grieved Joel as a neighbor. He did not say the word whales again. He did not say gate. The warden read the statute on obstruction and the penalties written in a dry hand years ago by someone who had expected to protect. Clamors from spiteful rivals, not whales from commerce. The numbers sounded small beside the winter's weight. Fines, suspended licenses. A line on a record that would complicate mortgages. People murmured not because the law was wrong, but because it was light. Wren leaned close as Mara packed her tripod. The manager will try to settle this in rooms without cameras, she said. Don't let him. Let the water be the room. Mara nodded. She stepped outside into air that pinched her cheeks and thought of Ranger's eye, level with hers across a skin of sea and of Mira's calm when the gate opened. There was an answer in that calm. Not forgiveness, direction. Dawn cut the harbor like a thin blade. Frost skinned the planks. Lines turned stiff as pipe. The air smelled of cold iron, kelp, and diesel. A winter trinity that told you who stayed. Mara slid the Zodiac off its cleat and kept her steps sure. Her palm ached where the rope had written its lesson. The ridge above the hotel held its bent spruce like a crooked finger pointing at the mouth of the cove. Out there, the water lay flat, pretending patience. She launched at half-tide. The hydrophone dropped and trembled the way it always did when it remembered the deep. Sound rose, shrimp ticking, a trawler far off, and then the voices that kept her here. Mira with 3 measured pulses and a pulse. Ranger lower, a steady line beneath. The pod held outside the cove, not entering, like travelers at a checkpoint that used to be manned. No mesh today, no gate, still, caution. She cut the engine. The Zodiac drifted with the faint turn of current. The hotel windows kept their dull shine. Snow began to sift in a fine, private way. She filmed the mouth and spoke low into her mic. Entrance clear. Behavior careful. Mira tested the edge and backed off. Ranger surfaced and cut a clean vertical, then slid under. The juveniles flared, eager, then tucked at Myra's brief insistence. The calf breathed twice with quick, blunt exhales. Herring moved in a thin band, promising a thicker noon. Mara slipped into the water. Cold cupped her ribs and set the terms. Sound sharpened. Myra's cadence moved through her bones like a slow drum. Ranger passed low, white patch flashing once like a small moon. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He knew where she would be. Metal on rock. She heard it like a pin dropped on a church floor. Not anchor, not chain, a spike finding stone. She surfaced. On the ridge, two figures wrestled a sled over a lip and into the path above the hotel. The crooked spruce stood above them like a signature. She marked the angle of their bodies, the way the quick one's hood shook, the way the heavier one leaned into weight with the confidence of an old habit. She hauled into the boat, trimmed the throttle, and moved for the point, keeping her wash quiet. She tied off in the hotel cove and climbed. The sled had eaten a lane into crust, down to dirt in places. Orange crumbs littered the path, small plastic flecks cut from ties. She bagged a few with tweezers and a calm hand. She followed the cut along a gully that smelled of cold pennies and wet spruce. Voices. The quick one. Words thrown faster than breath. We sat here. Ebbs easy. The heavier one, steady. Wait for slack. Don't fight water. He sounded like a man who loved being the one who knew obvious things. She lay behind a fallen log and raised her phone through a peeled oval of bark. The camera found hands, rope, orange tags, stamped with a brand name in tiny raised letters. It found a torn map showing the cove with arrows at the mouth and a note. Calm only, no lights, gate here. A contingency gate sketched farther in. The recorder drank the rest. A pocket full of air turned into a net. They passed with the sled empty, faces hidden in practical ways, not theatrical ones. The quick one scuffed his left boot every fifth step, as if his body kept time. The heavy one walked with a stillness that tried to read his authority. They did not see her. She counted their steps until the sound fell away. At the station, wet wool and copy paper made the air domestic. Wren watched the footage twice with the calm of someone who knows how lies stand up under weight. The warden pinned prints to a corkboard and drew simple lines. The prosecutor arrived in a coat that still held airport smell. You have obstruction, she said. You have endangerment. If I can tie Joel here, we talk manslaughter. We need money. We need direction. We need a hand on a knot and a voice giving the order. Mara returned to the ridge with a trail camera angled to see hands and a small recorder tucked low where men paused to breathe. She learned wind and microphone, shelter and rattle. She buried backup cards under a flat rock and a story only she would remember. Dusk, the quick one came first, pacing like a trapped bird. The heavy one followed with a spool and a quiet that tried to be gravity. Their words landed plain. The quick one wanted money up front. The heavy one said results first. The quick one said hazard pay. The heavy one said maintenance. They spoke the manager's title without his name. They dropped Joel's name and the recorder lost the sentence. The camera caught a mutter when the quick man bent to tie his boot. Should V let him call? Or made sure? The word sure scraped the bark. Wren and the warden listened with their heads tilted, the way you turn a glass to catch light. The prosecutor wrote the line in a narrow hand. A warrant slid into the day with the inevitability of snow finding a gap. They chose morning, not for drama but for daylight that turned excuses into jokes. Mara slept badly. She named objects to steady herself: stove, boots, chart, log, rope, knife. She wrote on her palm with a thick marker over the thin pink ridge, "Keep it clean, half-tide again." The water lay like a sheet pulled smooth. Sound rose, mirror crisp, Ranger steady, calves tucked, herring promising. The ridge kept its counsel. By mid-morning, the figures appeared as if on a schedule they believed God had endorsed. Sled full, faces hidden. They set the first anchor on the old scar. They tested tension with practiced boredom. The quick one checked his phone. The heavy one threaded mesh with the competence of someone who has tied the same knot too many times to be proud. They dropped the gate and cinched the ties. Orange flashed in gray water, like a bad sign you can see from a block away. Mira turned and refused the cove. She circled and clicked a short, firm message. Not here. Not now. Ranger held the outer line like a wall. The juveniles respected the language. The calf surfaced twice in quick commas. The gate breathed against rock. Wren moved first, then the warden, descending the slope in winter feet. No shouting. No theater. Names. Badges. Hands. The heavy man lifted his chin and tried to set his body like a barricade. It didn't hold. The quick man looked at his hands like they belonged to someone who had failed him. The warden took the spool. Wren cut a tie, bagged the orange, and passed it to the officer with a look that said, "Record everything." Mara slid into the water and cut the rest. Plastic confetti drifted like ugly snow. She netted what she could. She shouldered the gate. Water pushed through and said yes. Mira held for one beat, and then took the opening with the ease of someone reclaiming something that had been hers all along. Ranger followed last, like always, counting bodies with his presence. The pod flowed out. The cove exhaled. A hotel deck filled with people who forgot to perform their surprise. The chair watched without giving a speech. Joel's widow stood near the stairs, face still, hands steady. Lee hovered by the shed, hatless, pale, a small black book heavy in his pocket. The manager arrived with counsel and said words that sounded polished and wrong. Contractors, policy, community, aberration. He did not say Joel's name. He did not look at Joel's widow. The silence did that work for him. Charges read clean in a room that hummed like a transformer. Obstruction in habitat used by protected marine mammals. Tampering. Operating without required illumination. The prosecutor added manslaughter with a footnote. Pending lab, pending tide, pending bruise. The heavy man blinked slow, like a big animal seeing rain. The quick man nodded, like someone promising himself to talk. Mara returned to the water because air felt complicated. The cove sounded relieved, which is to say normal. Mira went inside with caution. Ranger held the outside line. Calves tucked. Herring tightened. Snow lost interest. By afternoon, the station smelled like wet hats. Lee sat at a metal table and looked at his hands as if they might confess without his mouth. He said he thought the gates were about fish lanes. He said he didn't think about whales. He said he didn't think about Joel falling. He said the heavy man told him to run dark because lights drew activists and activists drew phones. He said he didn't own orange twine. He said he knew who did. He signed pages. He walked out under a coat too thin for the air. The manager answered questions until the black book appeared. The book had names and dates and amounts that would matter and amounts that would not, and little notes that proved something uglier than a simple job. The cousin's number matched the quick man's phone. The salvage yard ledger matched a purchase date. The trail camera captured a handoff in a brown paper bag at the Crook Spruce. The chain pulled itself tight. The lawyer asked for a recess. The manager returned with his shoulders lower and his voice smaller than the room. The board sent a statement. We are committed. We will review. We will cooperate. The town paper tried to fit Wales and winter and the word justice on one line. National outlets called. Mara answered 2 and passed 5 to Wren and the warden. She sent the prosecutor a clean reel with timestamps that looked like coordinates. She kept copies in 3 places and wrote their locations on a card she slid into a book on her shelf, because paranoia is just good record-keeping with better shoes. At dusk, she climbed to the ridge and pulled the camera that had watched the path like a patient neighbor. It offered more than she expected. It held the heavy man taking cash from the cousin. It held the quick man moving alone, humming in a way that felt like apology. It held empty frames that felt like the right future. She leaned on the hotel deck rail and let cold wind pick heat off her skin. A boy in a blue hat asked if whales remember people. She said whales remember roots and pressure and danger, and sometimes shapes that don't harm them. He nodded like this was better than magic. Wren brought 2 paper cups that managed heat, if not flavor. "You need rest," Wren said. "The trial will eat anyone who shows up hungry." "I'll sleep," Mara said. "Trying isn't sleeping," Wren said. "I'll sleep," Mara answered, and for once she meant it. Night fell with clean edges. Harbor lights carved small cones in the dark. A dog barked once and surrendered. Mara locked her door and sat with her back to the stove until her hand softened. She wrote the timeline by hand. Calf, rumor, Joel. Creek, twine, map, voices. Gate, arrest, ledger. She added 1 more word and drew a box around it. Motive, money, schedule, arrogance. The old trinity. Days stretched thin between arrest and arraignment. The heavy man refused speech. The quick man learned silence on advice. Joel's widow moved through town like a weather report people actually believed. The chair resigned. The manager resigned. The board installed an interim who owned softer vowels and warmer coats. The council announced a moratorium on night operations inside the inner harbor pending review. It sounded like courage and compromise, finding a way to stand in the same sentence. Mara kept diving. Work turned fear into sequence. The pod settled. Myra reclaimed routes with new caution. Ranger passed within 30 feet once, slow, holding his line as if to say lines could still be trusted. The calves practiced with herring and improved. The juveniles waited their turns. The water returned to ordinary, which is the best word winter has. She cut the film like a mechanic tightening bolts by feel. She shaved narration to bone. She let human voices carry testimony, not triumph. She refused heroics. She refused villains as caricature. She let the ridge and the gate and the rope and the bruise make the case. She knew her audience. She knew how justice tastes on a screen and how quickly sweetness spoils. She kept it clean. A mild storm moved in and drew dots on black water. She went out anyway because habit and honest work often share a door. A young male called in a register she hadn't mapped. Mira answered with a short no. He turned. He learned. That's the good math. The date landed on paper. Early April. Still winter enough to keep memory sharp. Close enough to keep people from sanding down their own edges. The prosecutor laid out witnesses. The warden first, statute like a spine. Jay with sails and dates and clean handwriting. The quick man to narrate nights and directions. Lee with the ledger. The cousin if he returned. Mara with images and time. Joel's widow only if necessary, because grief had done enough labor already. The morning of arraignment tasted like tin. Breath smoked. Coats whispered. The heavy man kept his eyes on wood grain. The quick man stared at the flag like it owed him something. The manager sat behind counsel with a face that tried to bend toward humility and broke. The judge read charges with no embroidery. Bail landed like small stones. Date set. A machine started. Outside, wind pushed people into clusters. Giles' widow touched the railing and stood taller by a small amount that looked large because winter steals height. Wren squeezed Mara's shoulder. "Now you sleep," Wren said. "I will," Mara said. She walked to the dock and looked out at the cove. Far beyond, a black fin drew a clean line. It stood straight and then fell, a period at the end of a hard sentence. She went home and wrote 3 lines beneath the others. Keep gates open. Keep records honest. Keep watching the ridge. Then she turned off her phone and the lights and lay down fully clothed, the way divers nap between tides. Sleep came in a slow tide of its own. It pulled her out and brought her back. When she woke near midnight, the room was blue with moonlight flattened by cloud. She listened for weather and heard only the old building settling. She reached for the notebook and, without turning on the lamp, wrote one more sentence on the page by feel. Winter teaches roots. People choose gates. In the morning, she would dive again and be ready for court. Spring took its time crossing the water. Ice loosened along the inner bends, like stitches coming out of a wound. The crooked spruce still pointed at the cove's mouth like an unasked question. Snow thinned to pockets, and under those pockets the path remained. Orange flecks waited in the thaw like stubborn lies. Mara woke before the ferry horn and watched weak light take shape along the window. The court date sat on the table like a clock. She drank coffee that had forgotten how to be good and wrote what came next in clean. Lines, names, times, routes. She checked batteries, lenses, drives, and the drisuit laid across a chair. The rope burn on her palm had faded to a pale crescent. Spring makes old aches feel like lessons. Winter makes them feel like warnings. She could not tell which this would be. At the ramp, the harbor held the stretched silence of a gym before a game. The warden's truck rolled in with Wren behind it. Wren's grin was small and sure. The quick man had broken, she said. Winter stacked wrong. Money poured in like bad water. He named the heavy man as the one who gave orders and the manager as the one who kept his hands clean while telling others where to put theirs. He said Joel caught them running dark and said he would call. A splash, a curse, then quiet. He claimed he had not seen the struggle, only its absence. The prosecutor amended the case. Conspiracy, obstruction, endangering wildlife, involuntary manslaughter. Names, dates, purchase slips, trail camera frames, chain of money, chain of rope. The manager's counsel issued a statement that slid off the day. Commitment, community, cooperation, no whales, no Joel. Mara launched. The Zodiac answered her hand like an old friend opening a door. The hydrophone found its pitch. Mira spoke first, measured as ever, with a faint lift at the end. Ranger followed low, a steady line under everything. The pod rode the outer edge and then slipped in with wide, careful turns. She logged behavior, temperature, cloud, tide, and something less official, but as present as breath, a careful patience now that the gate was gone. She cut the engine and lay across the tube, face over water. A gleam passed beneath her. White patch, eye dark as a well. He had seen her and recognized a shape that had not hurt him. Enough. On the ridge rail, Lee leaned with both hands, as if wood could teach him how to stand. The ledger rode under his coat like a heartbeat. He met her on the dock and asked if whales forgive. Whales change routes, she said. He nodded and asked if Joel's widow might speak to him. She said she did not know. He said he would ask anyway. I didn't think of whales as living their own plan, he added. Only as something we had to work around. Court days have their own weather. The sky cleared as if to show every face in full light. The gym held rows of chairs, floor wax, coffee in air pots. Tension stretched from wall to wall. Joel's widow sat second row, coat folded beside her. The heavy man kept his jaw locked. The manager sat 2 rows behind counsel as if distance could turn blood into water. The warden spoke first. Clean lines. Statute numbers. A photograph of the gate with orange tags bright on gray water. Obstruction where whales habitually travel and feed. Hazard to navigation. Disregard for safety on the inner curve at night. We teach our kids to leave gates open, he said, and made it sound like a law ancient as tide. Jay followed with the ledger and the voice of a man who keeps accounts because memory is soft. Dates. 2 spools sold late to a man with a badge clipped under his coat. No haggling, no smile. A signature. A trail camera still near the crooked spruce. The quick man spoke. He had set gates before and been told not to worry because whales weren't there, and people cry about whales when they re-hungry. He ran dark to avoid phones. He watched Mara turn away and felt victory where he should have felt warning. At home, he heard clicks in his sleep that never answered back. The heavy man called him boy when he hesitated. The prosecutor unspooled Mara's footage without flourish. Gate, zip ties, knife, opening. Bodies moving with intention. Ranger last. Calmness more damning than drama. The room leaned in. When Joel's widow stood, the room became small. She spoke of the last night. Light left on, deck tidy. A note about turning up heat if the north wind lifted. Rules are not furniture, she said. Rules are doors. Joel told the heavy man, you run lights or you run tomorrow from the warden. Someone laughed. She did not name the laugh. A state lab officer described the hair trapped in the cut orange thread. Human, not enough to name. Enough to put bodies in the act. The prosecutor pinned the salvage order beside the trail camera frame and let the room read itself. The judge watched without moving his mouth once. Outside, the courthouse reporters clustered. The manager declined comment with a smile from another town. Counsel guided the heavy man away. Joel's widow stood near puddles catching sky. Lee approached with his cap in his hands. They spoke softly. She did not forgive. She did not flinch. Then she offered her hand. He took it as if it could cut him. It did not. Mara needed hair without law in it. She slid into a cove that had memorized her weight and cut the engine. The hydrophone found the pod beyond the kelp. Myra's cadence settled into her bones. Ranger under everything, a bass note that keeps shape. The young male flashed close and corrected when Myra said offense. The calf tried a boldness and learned what boundaries feel like when they move for you and then let you go. News traveled faster than tide. A wire story ran with a thin furrow and a headline that made everything simple. The farm board fired the manager with language made of rubber and glass. The heavy man's bail was revoked on a technicality everyone knew was more than technical. The council turned its moratorium into a ban on night operations in sensitive coves. Enforcement finally grew teeth. Wren brought dinner and said the prosecutor wanted one more question about motive. Not legal, but human. Why gates? Why winter? Why whales? Why money? Why men who run dark when lights could keep everyone honest? Mara chose the sentence. Because some people think the water waits for permission. Trial days piled like drift. The heavy man's story shrank. He had been maintaining line, preventing collision with debris, fishing legally with a net that did not look like one. He had never met the manager in any context that mattered. He had seen Joel at a distance, and then not at all. Maybe became a habit, and a habit began to sound like the inverse of truth. On a day, the sky forgot to cloud the judge, called for closings. The prosecutor kept it lean. Roke, gate, night, root, calf, Joel, money. The defense gestured at doubt, until doubt looked like a net with holes you could drive a pod through. The jury left. The room exhaled. The verdict arrived early afternoon. Guilty on obstruction. Guilty on conspiracy. guilty on operating without lights in a posted zone. Not guilty on manslaughter, not because the room doubted harm, but because winter erased the shape of the moment, the way wind erases a fresh path. Sometimes truth is bigger than guilt. Sometimes guilt is smaller than consequence. Sentencing set for late spring. Relief and disappointment braided into something real. Jawa's widow thanked the warden and Ren and Jay and Lee, and then looked at Mara and made a small gesture that meant thank you for blinking when I needed to breathe. Work did not stop. Work wants full tanks, clean lenses, charged batteries, safe water. She dived when weather allowed. The pod widened its circuit. Herring wrote broad silver essays in open channels. She filmed less and watched more, matching the pace that keeps whales mammal and divers human. On a fog-soft morning, Ranger rose within 10 yards and held level. The white patch blinked dark water. She asked for no blessing. He dipped and passed under, taking his line where it was supposed to go, the line Mira taught and he would teach. In-town crews replaced tired signs with sturdier warnings about night runs, illumination, and protected routes. A map showed paths whales use most. The teenager who had stood up in the meeting got hired to hand out stickers and facts. The harbor held a small day of relief. Sentencing came on a gray-green afternoon. The judge handed down a term smaller than the winter it owed, fines that would sting then dull, probation that looked useful on paper, and nothing like water. He added community service that included teaching safe habits and standing beside a case in the council lobby that held a strip of orange twine, a bagged zip tie, and a page labeled gate. Mara's film went out to screens and faces in kitchens that smelled like toast. Views rolled like tide. Comments landed like stones, like praise, like small, honest notes. She answered a few and let others pass. At the top, she pinned the line. Whales choose routes. We choose gates. The runs thickened with light. Mira walked younger whales into herring with the calm of a teacher who prefers competence to applause. Ranger wore thin new scars that looked like arguments ended without blood. Calves played and did not drift toward danger. The camera came up only when the water offered a sentence no words could hold. Fog lay between cliffs like thought. The surface held a secret on its skin. She drifted to the cove and let the engine die. A juvenile called fast, and Mira answered with patience that felt like law. Ranger added one note, not corrective, just present. The new one settled. In that exchange lived the winter entire. She slid in. Hold agreed to terms. Light in the water went pale and heavy the way noon does when fog makes it dawn. She lay long enough for breath to turn from labor to rhythm. Ranger passed deep and then up, near enough to call it one body length. He did not turn his head. He did not offer a sign. He did what safe whales do. He kept going. Survival is not a stunt. It is a route held across conflict, a line not cut by the smallest greed. At the dock, an old woman handed her a paper napkin with 2 words in block pencil. Keep going. Mara folded it and tucked it into the dressute pocket where she kept a spare zip tie she would not need. She walked up the ramp and felt the tone different under her feet. That night she cut a last sequence she had resisted because endings like to be too clean. She said it plain. The ridge. A crooked spruce. The hotel sign about lights that stated instead of threatened. The cove mouth clean. Orange flecks bagged in a lobby case. The pod sliding across gray water. Joel's deck light on in a shot from last year, then off, then dawn. She let the images speak and refused to push them past truth. A woman kept returning because winter reveals who we are. Whales carry memory like maps, and towns do too. Ranger kept his line and taught more about law than any book. Mira told the young when to play and when to hold, and that wisdom is worth defending. Joel left his light on. A light is not a symbol. It is a tool. Gates are simple and brutal. A gate is a tie, a net, an idea. It is a sentence that begins with "not today" and ends with "no one will know." We know. The water remembers touch, and so do we. This town chose to open rather than close. That choice is not a chapter. It is a practice. Look for your own gates. The quiet ones set at night, where water used to flow. She looked into the lens the way she looks into water, expecting nothing and asking for truth she could carry. "If this stays with you, keep coming back," she said. Open things are harder to guard than closed ones. That is why they matter. She clicked off the camera and let the stove's small heat hold the room. Evening settled cleanly. The water darkened. Far out a fin lifted, held, and fell. She said goodnight to the ridge and the crooked spruce and a gate that no longer existed. She labeled her drives, slipped one under a floorboard, only she knew how to lift, and tucked the napkin into her notebook. Keep going. The film posted the next afternoon. It traveled where she would never set foot. It landed in phones on buses and in living rooms where whales exist only as headlines. People argued. Others moved a switch from off to on before walking outside. A harbor master 2 states away posted new rules for night runs. A teenager on an inland river picked up trash. An old man wrote a check he had mocked in younger years. Mara watched the count once and then darkened the screen. The fjord lay in a plain mood. Clouds made a lid. Light found a seam at the horizon. She packed the camera, checked the knife, laid a hand on the Zodiac's tube. Cold, real, ready. Work waited. The whales would come and go on their terms. Her job was to listen and learn and keep human gates open. She pushed off, engine a low, steady heart under her ribs, and turned toward the mouth of the cove. Not to chase, not to be blessed, but to hold a place in the water beside a story that did not belong to her and tell the part that did. If you are watching, feel that pull not to her, but to the habit of leaving roots open and the discipline of noticing where you have tied something shut. If you are listening, hear how whales speak with distance and return, and how people can too if they learn. And if you were here, if you could stand on the deck and taste iron and salt and diesel that mean winter kept its promise, you would see what she sees. A black fin drawing a clean line across the skin of the world, opening it without breaking it. A reminder that the water does not forget, and neither should we. Keep going. Keep lights on. Keep gates open. Choose routes you can live with. The sea keeps our choices the way it keeps our reflections, altered by current and wind, but they're always there, waiting to be claimed or confessed. If this stayed with you, subscribe and like so you will be here when the next winter begins and the water asks what kind of people we chose to be.